Hi. So we're into this stress, lifestyle, and health chapter. How incredibly appropriate is this chapter right now? So incredibly appropriate. Who does not suffer from some kind of stress in their life? Everyone does. So let's get into it. What is stress? Well, stress is a process by where an individual, this is a key here, where an individual perceives and responds to events that they appraise as overwhelming or threatening to their well being. So, just by this definition, we can see that stress is very subjective. Right with the mouse. This is very subjective. Demanding or threatening events are often seen as are often referred to as stressors. So what we do is when we first have an event, we have a primary appraisal. This involves a judgment to the degree of potential harm or threat to our well-being that a stressor might entail. And the secondary appraisal is, do we have the ability to cope with the stressor? Okay, so what we do when we first have something that is a stressor is we appraise it. Okay, is this threatening? Not really, so we don't feel that stress. Secondary, can I cope with it? Yeah, I could totally cope with it. So if primary says, yeah, this is threatening my resources, then secondary says, yeah, I can cope with it, then the stress is reduced, okay? But if primary says, yes, this is threatening, and no, I can't cope with it, then the stress potentially is increased. So eustress is considered good stress and distress is considered bad stress. So eustress is a good kind of stress, positive feelings, optimal health and performance. So a little bit of stress in essence can help you perform better. Distress is a bad type of stress. This is when it exceeds the optimal level and becomes excessive and potentially debilitating. It's associated with fatigue, exhaustion, and decline in performance. If it continues, it can also see health impacts, which we'll talk about later. So the scientific study of how stress and psychological factors impact health is health psychology. This is a subfield of psychology that devotes its time to seeing how how our psychological well-being influences our health, how illness can influence our psychological well-being, and how people respond when they come ill. Health psychologists investigate why people make certain life choices and the effectiveness of interventions for these unhealthy behaviors. For example, I am involved in a health coaching type of group. So I'm getting health coaching to help manage food eating and weight and all of that. And they're keeping all kind of data to see if it's actually successful. If it's helping people, then it's saving money. So they're going to continue the program. So they have a lot of health psychologists that are involved in this. So our fight or flight response. Walter Cannon proposed that fight or flight response occurs when a person experiences a strong emotion, especially those associated with a perceived threat. The body is rapidly aroused. Remember, the sympathetic nervous system and the endocrine system, these are your hormones, but the sympathetic nervous system, remember, that dries out your mouth, stops digestion, makes your blood pump faster, your heart rate starts to get up, you start to have shortness of breath, like start kind of the breathing heavier. This arousal helps prepare the person for fight or flee. Now there's also another one that's called freeze, which we don't discuss in this book or in this chapter, but it's a good one to know about. It's fight, flight, or freeze. That's a Z. Because a lot of people will kind of freeze up when they feel threatened. Adaptive because it enables us to adjust to internal and external changes in the environment. The GAD, or General Adaptation Syndrome, this is Hans Selye incidentally discovered that when exposed to prolonged negative stimulation or stressors, rats show signs of adrenal enlargement, thymus and lymph node shrinkage, and stomach ulceration. So this kind of tells us, hey, if the rats are doing it, that's probably what's happening to us too. Selye realized that the responses were triggered by a coordinated series of psychological interactions that unfold over time during continued exposure to that stressor. So this became known as the General Adaptation Syndrome. This is the body's nonspecific physiological arousal or response to stress. How this works is you have your first stage, which is the alarm stage. The body's immediate reaction. This is a fight or flight, okay? If exposed to this stage as you're exposed to this stage, you then go into a stage of resistance. So you have your alarm stage, the first initial alarm, then you go to a state of resistance, okay? This is where the body puts out alerts, it's prepared, it's less intense, but the stressor is still there. And over a long period of time, you finally reach a stage of exhaustion. Now, you're going to hit exhaustion whether the stressor is taken care of or not. All right, exhaustion is going to happen. No longer able to adapt to the stressor, you've depleted your physical resources. So it's very, very important. For example, with my life, I have what's considered a chronic state of stress, or a chronic stressor, which is my child who is medically fragile. Children in general can be stressful, but this particular stressor, it doesn't go away. Her disability is always there, so I'm always kind of on guard for what may happen. So I can't live in that state of stress. So I have to find ways to manage that so that her potential episode isn't something that I'm kind of like waiting around to see if it happens, because that could be devastating to me. I'm going to hit exhaustion. And that's where you hit the burnout as well. Like if you're at a job and you don't like the job and you're trying to resist that stressor, you're trying to push through it, and eventually you will hit that burnout exhaustion. So it's really important to find ways to mediate that stress if you are in a situation where the stressor cannot be removed. Like in my situation, the situation we're going through right now, the stressor cannot be removed. So you have to find ways to mitigate that. All right, so the physiology of stress. So the physiological mechanics of stress generally involve the work of two systems. All right, your sympathetic nervous system. Remember, we talked about the nervous system. This is part of the peripheral nervous system. The sympathetic nervous system activates, is your activation, you could say, and the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal, HPA axis. In response to stress, the hypothalamus releases corticotrophin releasing factors, a hormone that causes the pituitary gland to then release adrenocorticotropic hormone, ACTH, which then activates the adrenal glands to secrete a number of hormones into the bloodstream. Okay. Now, earlier we talked about if you first get an initial stressor, what's first going to be involved is neurotransmitters. Okay. So if you're able to bring yourself down, like try to bring yourself down while the neurotransmitters are in action, this is a you. Neurotransmitters are in action, it's a lot easier to calm down. Once the hormones get involved, it takes a lot more time. Once the hormones get involved, it takes a lot more time to calm you down. It takes a lot more time to relax, because the hormones are now coursing through the bloodstream. One of the hormones is cortisol, commonly known as the stress hormone, and this prepares you for fight or flight, or as we said before, also freeze. So traumatic events, stressors in this category include things: military combat, threat of physical assault, terrorist attacks, natural disasters, automobile accidents. Men, non-whites, and individuals of lower socioeconomic status groups report experiencing a greater number of traumatic events than women do, and that quite possibly is because of the military. Whites and individuals of higher socioeconomic status groups. When we talk about traumatic events, quite often people go straight to military or straight to things that are in the moment devastating. But also you can have traumatic events if you're dealing with chronic illness, if you're a caregiver, like somebody who's caring for someone with Alzheimer's, for example. It's a constant series of traumatic events. So my daughter is another example. It's a constant series of traumatic events where we're having to deal with, potentially catastrophic episodes weekly. So it's not just what's listed here. There's other things that can be equivalent to or the same with traumatic events. So you've got to take that into account especially when, you're talking about stressors and people's ability to cope. Some people can cope better than others with traumatic events. That's why you see some individuals, they don't have the, maybe coming back from a war, coming back from being overseas, they don't have the same uh, symptoms or issues that other individuals do. Maybe they saw things that were different. Maybe their coping skills are different. Their resilience isn't as high. So this is extremely subjective when we talk about traumatic events. Is the event traumatic? Yes. But will the response be the same from all individuals? No. So we talk about socioeconomic status and how we see higher traumatic events, as well as more psychological issues from traumatic events. Quite possibly maybe that higher socioeconomic status has access to or values clinical or counseling work. So life changes are huge. If you think about it, your life changes every semester when you go to class, when class is going to be, especially now we've had a lot of life changes. Some other examples can include death of a family member, marriage, divorce, moving. Even if it's a good thing, it's still a stressor, okay? All right, the social readjustment rating scale. This is a rating scale that consists of 43 life events, and each event is kind of given points. And the more points you accumulate within 6 months, the higher your risk of severe stress response. Research shows that accumulating many points in a short time is bad, but critics say that the scale doesn't really take appraisal of the events into account. So, for example, death of a loved one, if you were caring for somebody that had a profound illness and, they pass away, it's not going to be the same type of stressor as an individual who loses somebody like without knowing they were going to pass, kind of the whole nothing was wrong, what happened, kind of just out of the blue. Daily hassles are also huge. These are things like laundry. All right, laundry is my absolute nemesis. I have serious problems with laundry, but also other things: traffic, lost keys, obnoxious coworkers. These are things that basically build up, and then by the end of the day, you're like, rah! You're freaking out because everything's been happening all day long. Research demonstrated that daily hassles are actually better predictors of physical and psychological health than our daily life change units. So it's very important to get kind of those daily hassles under control, so you're not getting microbursts of stress all day. Excuse me. All right. I had to sneeze. So occupational stressors. Some jobs are just inherently stressful. Things like firefighters, nursing, uh, uh, things that just involve life-threatening situations. Stressors can be connected to work, heavy workload, uncertainty, lack of control. Also, job strain and job burnout. Job strain is when work combines excessive job demands and work overloads with little discretion in decision making or job control. And then job burnout. This is a general sense of just emotional exhaustion. And there's a really cool concept called emotional labor. And it's not in your book, but you can Google it, emotional labor. It's a really cool concept because we have to participate in emotional labor daily. That's kind of the fake it till you make it, smile even if you don't want to kind of thing. So, all right. Psychophysiological disorders. These are physical disorders or disease whose symptoms are brought on or worsened by stress. So things like rashes, ulcers, depression, anxiety, and anger are all factors to chronic health problems. So we see that individuals that suffer from depression and anxiety also have chronic health problems. So it's really important to not just say, oh, well, it's just anxiety. You should always get everything checked out first. make sure the heart's doing okay, make sure your blood work's okay. And then if that's showing that everything's fine, nothing's abnormal, that's when you start saying, okay, there could be something psychological going on. All right, stress in the immune system. We know that stress reduces the body's ability to function its immune system. It reduces the body's immune system. The immune system is like the body's survival system. It can mistake your body's own healthy cells for invaders and attack them. This is an autoimmune disease. It could also have issues with immunosuppression. Immune systems break down and are unable to do its job. Psychoneuroimmunology is a field that studies how psychological factors such as stress influence the immune system and immune functioning. For example, people with chronic stress are more likely to develop colds, more likely to have aches and pains, less resistant to pain. So it's very, very interesting to see how stress can affect you so much physiologically. All right, cardiovascular disease. Heart disease is the leading cause of death in the developed world, causes approximately 1 in 3 deaths in the US. Hypertension or high blood pressure, major risk factors for heart disease. Putting more physical strain on the heart can be hard. It's scary because there's no symptoms, okay? So the thing is, you have to keep that stress in check. Risk factors to cardiovascular disorder: aging, income, education, employment, behavioral risk factors such as unhealthy diet, tobacco use, inactivity, or alcohol consumption. All right, with type A and type B personalities. The type A personality is that intensely driven, whereas a type B is that more laid back. We see that type A personalities are more prone to heart disease, but if you remove the hostility factor, if you remove the anger dimension factor in type A, we don't see the chronic health issues. So it's more so not really type A, get it done, be competitive, have a goal. It's that anger and hostility that makes type A personality more dangerous with regards to health. So if you're I'm a type A personality, but I don't have the hostility and anger. And so I'm more laid back in essence of if things don't go right, I'm like, okay, that didn't go right. Let's try something different. But if you have that anger and antagonistic interactions, that's when you can have a problem with heart disease being a type A personality. Negative affectivity. This is a tendency to experience distressful emotional states. These are individuals that have, it has been linked to the development of hypertension and heart disease. These are individuals who kind of see everything more so in a negative light. Disgust, guilt, fear, nervousness, anger. So seeing things more negatively. All right, depression in the heart. A study in the 1970s looked at 8,000 manic depressive persons in Denmark, finding 50% increase of deaths from heart disease among these patients. Now, one of the only problems with this particular study is that the individuals, some of them were already diagnosed with heart disease, so that could have contributed to the depression. But we still see that's a pretty strong number. Patients with heart disease have more depression than the general population. So there is a question of, kind of what came first, were they already kind of depressive and they're more likely to develop heart disease, or they were developing heart disease and they kind of became depressive, lethargic, being misinterpreted as depression. All right, depression, especially if it occurs early in life, may increase the likelihood of an unhealthy lifestyle, which can contribute to heart disease. All right, asthma. Asthma is chronic disease. Now, why is asthma in stress, health, and coping? Well, because asthma can be triggered by stress, okay? You can have stress-induced asthma, and it can also be completely physiological without a stress induction. So don't just say, oh, well, you only have asthma because you're stressed. No. All right, but it definitely can be stress-induced. So it's a chronic disease in which airways of the respiratory system become obstructed, leading to great difficulty expelling air from the lung airways, obstructions caused by inflammation of the airways and tightening of the muscles around them. Asthma affects 18.7 million U.S. adults and 4,000 deaths a year. Asthma attacks often trigger environmental factors such as air pollution, allergens, cigarette smoke, airway infections, cold air or sudden temperature change or change in temperature can also influence, and also you can have exercise-induced asthma. Tension headaches, I think everybody has experienced a tension headache at some point in their lives. Um, about 2.3% of the population suffer from chronic tension headaches, but the majority of individuals have experienced a headache simply because of tension or stress. Migraine's a little bit different. A migraine can definitely come on because of stress. Migraines in themselves, though, can be a diagnosis with migraine headaches, and there could be more than just stress going on. There could be neurological reasons for that. So that's something that you don't want to ignore. If you're getting chronic headaches all the time, you absolutely need to see a doctor, but it could be related to stress. So how do we cope? Well, one way is problem-focused coping. Problem-focused coping is an attempt to manage or alter the problem, okay? Typically involving identifying the problem, considering possibilities for solution, and then selecting alternatives. This is actively trying to do something. So I do problem-focused coping with my child's disorder. Even though I can't control it, I still actively read all the research I can about it. Next is emotion-focused coping. This is an effort to change or reduce the negative emotions associated with the stress. So instead of looking at the negative things of what my daughter may go through later, what she's going through now, I kind of seek out the positives of, well, look, she's playing right now with Play-Doh and having a good time. You know, these efforts include avoiding, minimizing, maybe even distancing oneself from the problem, or seeking something positive within that negative event. Emotion-focused coping is a lot we do when we're powerless or dealing with an uncontrollable stressor. It's something we can't control. This is one of the reasons why a lot of people will say things like, oh, well, they're not that sick, or it's not that bad for them, because they're emotion-focused coping. It's hard to see people suffering. And so a lot of times we'll use emotion-focused coping to kind of deny that that suffering is happening. So perceived control and stress. So the more control we have, the less stressed we are. So if we have perceived control, like if we perceive that we have control over a situation, this is why people during the COVID-19, people ran out and bought up so much toilet paper, because they were trying to find a way. That's an awful, I can't really draw toilet paper. They were trying to find a way to cope with the situation. I don't draw toilet paper. They're trying to find a way to cope with the situation. Extensive research demonstrates the perception and control are associated with a variety of favorable outcomes, such as better physical health, mental health, and greater physical well-being. So if you're in a job or something where you have zero control at all whatsoever, then you need to look at that and say, okay, well, what do I control in this situation? I control how I keep my station. I control how I, do my job. So that in itself can help you feel better about your job. So learned helplessness. Learned helplessness is a situation in which an individual, Martin and Stellman, conducted a series of experiments which dogs were placed in chambers and they received shocks from which they could not escape. Later, when dogs were given the opportunity to escape by jumping over a partition, most failed to try. They seemed to just kind of give up and passively accept the shocks the experimenters were giving. In comparison to dogs who were previously allowed to escape the shocks, tended to jump the partition to escape the pain. So it's showing us kind of once individuals, and this applies to people as well, we see they get into situations where it's like, oh, well, don't need to try. What's the point anyways? I always fail. Or don't need to get out of this abusive relationship. I'm just going to end up in another one. So they kind of get in this learned helplessness cycle. The link between perceived control and stress provides a great explanation for observed relationships between social class and health outcomes. In general, research has found that more affluent individuals experience better health than individuals who are less affluent. So perhaps it's their control they have over their lives. Social support, extremely important, all right? Isolated men and women are 2 times more likely to die from cardiovascular disease and colds. This is why it's very important to get that social interaction, whether it's on Zoom, whether it's, calling friends. So it's absolutely important that we find our friends and we have that closeness with others. So stress reduction techniques, we're going to go over some of this. This exercise is beneficial for both physical and mental health. Physically fit Individuals are more resistant to adverse effects of stress, exercise, and also prevents telomere shortening. Telomere shortening is a really interesting concept. We don't talk much about it in psychology. You can Google it, look it up. But it's basically your cells cannot continue to divide if those telomeres are shortened to when they finally run out. So you want to slow the shortening down. Relaxation responses are great. Also, biofeedback. With biofeedback, this is electronic equipment is used to accurately measure a person's neuromuscular and autonomic activity. Feedback provides in the form of visual audio signals. So the person will actually see if I'm stressing out, my stress is going up. I can take some slow breaths and they can watch them bring themselves back down to a normal state. All right, lastly, happiness. All right, a pleasant life is a good life and a meaningful life. Happiness is an enduring state of mind consisting of joy, contentment, and other positive emotions, plus the sense that one's life has meaning and value. 5 happiest countries: Denmark, Norway, Switzerland, Netherlands, and Sweden. United States is the 17th happiness, which actually is pretty good. There's a lot of countries. 52% of adults say they are very happy, whereas 8 out of 10 on surveys say they are very satisfied with their lives. So factors that contribute to this happiness: of course, life satisfaction increases as people get older. Married people are happier. I know, mind-blowing. Happy people have more friends and stronger social networks. Residents of affluent countries tend to be happier. $75,000 a year seems to be the mark of happy. Anything over than that, we don't see more happy. Higher incomes may impair people's ability to savor small pleasures in life. Might be why we don't see more happy as people get more money. Happy people are more likely to be college educated. They have more fulfilling jobs, more control, right? When you look at jobs like that. Religiosity is correlated with happiness, but it depends on economics. And people without children are actually happier than people with children for a while, not always. And then attractiveness is not strongly related to happiness. So it's not, oh, you're prettier, so you're more happy. Absolutely not. So life events and happiness. Newlyweds predict that their happiness is their marital satisfaction remains pretty stable and improve. Marital satisfaction usually declines in the next 4 years, but there's a boost again after the kids get out of the house. Bursts of pleasure. We see big life events, marriage proposal, winning the lottery, inheritance, but dramatic life events have less long-lasting impacts on happiness than daily happiness, getting those daily hassles down, trying to find happiness in the small things, where you get into the mindfulness. People who are able to adapt to marriage so that their happiness level is stable. However, they do not adapt to unemployment or severe disabilities. This is something that individuals often will maintain a state of chronic stress or unhappiness. That's why it's really important for those individuals to seek out help, treatment, so they can have somebody help them find that happiness. So increasing happiness interventions to increase happiness include writing down 3 good things that happen each day. Also, National Happiness Scores has 6 variables: the per capita GDP, social support, freedom to make own decisions, healthy life expectancy, freedoms from perceived corruption in government and business, and also being generous can help you feel more happy. So positive psychology. This is the science of happiness. This is awesome stuff, guys. I would say if you buy a positive psychology textbook, that is like the best purchase you'll ever make in your life. This looks at people's strengths and what helps them be happy versus what makes them sad. So instead of what to avoid, positive psychology tells you what to do. So altruism, thinking of others, empathy, having a deep understanding for others, being creative, forgiving and having compassion, importance of positive emotions, looking at things in a positive light, enhancement of immune system functioning. All right. Positive psychologists help to see how we can enhance the immune system, and also savoring fleeting moments. This is the mindfulness that's so popular right now, and it really does work. So the effect of optimism. Positive affect is a pleasurable engagement with the environment, happiness, joy, enthusiasm, alertness, and excitement. Positive affect serves as a protector against heart disease. And optimism is generally looking at the bright side. So we see optimism is linked to longevity, healthy behaviors, fewer post-surgical complications, and better immune system functioning. Getting in a flow is another positive psychology aspect. This is awesome. It's kind of like the coloring that people do. This is basically finding an activity that's truly enthusiastic about, may be the real key to finding happiness. Oh, that's the end. Anyways, I'm sad it's over, but thank you guys so much for being here today, and I hope you have an absolutely wonderful time, and I will talk to you guys soon. Thanks. Bye.